So we're going to do our best to get you there, and then make sure that there's an environment in which entrepreneurs can flourish. And then I think it'll be amazing.
A big part of that, and we've talked about this, is inspiring people to look again at this. You know, we were talking about this yesterday. It was our grandparents who went to the moon, and we have not gone back since. You know, in my lifetime, no one's gone to the moon. You and I were having a conversation last year about what to put in Falcon Heavy, and the kind of what's the cargo, and the idea was to use that as an opportunity. Sagan had a beautiful thought many years ago that if you just get enough people to look at the Earth from a distance, that it would get them to focus on the problems here and on the possibilities of space exploration. I was fortunate enough to be with Falcon Heavy, launched a few weeks back, and we made a little movie. We've called it a trailer that sums up that experience. We have it here. We thought we'd play it for you guys again. This is 2 minutes that does a pretty good job of giving you the feeling of what it was like to be there when Falcon Heavy launched.
Yeah, we wanted to get the public, we wanted you to get excited about the possibility of something new happening in space, of the space frontier getting pushed forward. The goal of this was to inspire you and make you believe again, just as people believed in the Apollo era, that anything's possible. Thank you.
That picture at the end is a picture of one of the circuit boards inside the Roadster, right?
Yeah. We try to confuse the aliens as much as possible. If you look carefully, there's also a little Hot Wheels version of the Roadster with a tiny little astronaut in the Hot Wheels Roadster on the dashboard. That was just by a friend of ours called Nora. Nora suggested that, and so if you guys have any suggestions, let us know.
I think for me, watching those two boosters come down side by side felt like a transformative moment. It felt like we can do anything. And that's the culmination. I was really struck by vision and hundreds or thousands of very talented people working together to make sure. I was sitting in launch control and looking at the sheer amount of variables that you guys are clocking in those moments before the launch. Wind speed at different altitudes and the stats of all the different 27 engines in that. I mean, how do you manage, you're very hands-on with the details, but you're also looking at the bigger picture. How do you manage your time? How do you parse, how do you zoom in and zoom out and make sure that all these things are coming together?
Well, at SpaceX, almost all my time is spent on engineering and design. It's probably 80 and 90%. And then Gwynn Shotwell, who's President and Chief Operating Officer, takes care of the business operations of the company, which is what allows me to do that. Yeah, I think in order to make the right decisions, you have to understand. I'd like to just point out, like, what you saw there is a result of an incredible team at SpaceX, super talented people who really work like crazy to make that happen. I think my role is to make sure that they have an environment where they can really, where the talents can really come to the fore, but I can't tell you how honored and grateful I am to work with such a great team.
Everyone in this room is inspired by you. Who are you inspired by?
Well, Kanye West, obviously. Something you said.
Two.
Fred Astaire, you should see my dance moves.
We may see some dance moves unless...
I do love Fred Astaire, he's amazing. If you haven't watched his movies, they're amazing.
Yeah. I think for me, when I look at all of the things you've undertaken to do, the commonality is with Tesla, with SpaceX, Solar City, now with the Boring Company. It feels like you're seeing a firmly established and mature industry that is ripe for sort of a quantum shift. There's an opportunity there for, in the case of cars, it's electrification, which drastically changes, the complexity of an automobile and potentially down the line the expense of it. With rockets, it's the reusability of it. With solar, it's about a firmly established energy system that's about to be massively disrupted. This is happening. And with the Boring Company, it's about looking at infrastructure projects which typically take decades and billions of dollars, and looking to reduce the complexity of that. Is that how you see the world? Do you see the things that don't work and can be made better?
No. I don't sort of like look at things and say, okay, what's the rank ordered, business opportunity from a financial standpoint, or anything like that. It's really just like there's some things that don't seem to be working, that are important for for our life and for the future to be good. And I have to say that if one were to say, like, where is if one were to do a risk-adjusted rate of return estimate on various industry opportunities, I would put like basically building rockets and cars pretty close to the bottom of the list. That they would have to be the dumbest things to do, just because you look at the auto industry, and in the U.S. auto industry, the only two companies that haven't gone bankrupt, at least at some point, are Tesla and Ford. Every other company got bankrupt or was failing and got acquired. There's only two companies that haven't gone bankrupt, and there's a big graveyard of companies that did. So, and then you're going up against entrenched competitors. There's no. I gave basically both SpaceX and Tesla from the beginning a probability of less than 10% of likely to succeed. I just kept wondering why we were not making progress towards sending people to Mars, why we didn't have a base on the moon. Where are the sort of space hotels that were promised in 2001 in the movie? It's like, it just wasn't happening year after year. It was getting me down. I look at the NASA website. I was like, where does it say when we're going to Mars? It doesn't. So initially for SpaceX, for example, I thought, well, the genesis of SpaceX was not to create a company, but really how do we get NASA's budget to be bigger? That was initially the goal. So I came up with this little small philanthropic mission, which would be to send a small greenhouse to the surface of Mars. It's called Mars Oasis. And upon landing, the seeds would be in dehydrated nutrient gel, hydrated upon landing, and you'd have this little greenhouse, and then the money shot would be, green plants against a red background. So I recently learned that money shot has a meaning that I wasn't aware of, but I think that would get people excited about. It rekindles the spirit of Apollo, essentially. And as I got more and more into what it would take to do that, I learned that the fundamental issue is actually the cost of access to space. Rockets were super expensive, and the cost per pound or kilogram to orbit had actually gone up over the years, not down. And it was like, okay, well, it won't matter if we are able to do this philanthropic mission and it generates a lot of will to go to Mars. That's not going to matter if there's no way. So after my second or third trip back from Russia, I was like, whoa, there's got to be a way to build rockets it's not down. There's got to be a way to solve this rocket problem. I started reading a lot of books on rockets, and bit about sort of a first principles analysis of a rocket, just broke down the materials that are in a rocket, what would it cost to buy those materials, what versus the price of the rocket, and there's a gigantic difference between the raw material cost of the rocket and the finished cost of the rocket. So there must be something wrong happening in going from the constituent atoms to the final shape. And I found that certainly to be true. And then why weren't people trying to make reusability work? It was very difficult to make rocket reusability work. And then unfortunately the space shuttle ended up being a counterexample of don't try to make reusability work, because the space shuttle ended up costing more per flight than an expendable vehicle of equivalent capability. So for a long time, people used the space shuttle as an example of why reusability is dumb. And then you can't take a single case example and make an entire thing. It was very difficult to make rocket. So there's no question in my mind that if you could reuse the rockets, it has to be true reuse, which means rapid and complete reuse. The problem with the space shuttle is only a portion of the system came back. Like the big orange tank, which was also the primary airframe, was discarded every time, and the parts that were reused were incredibly difficult to refurbish. So the only kind of reuse that matters is if it's rapid and complete. It has to be. So the only thing you're changing between flights, apart from scheduled maintenance, is the propellant. Only a portion of the system. So we embarked upon that journey to create SpaceX in 2002. And the parts that were were incredibly difficult to And in the beginning, I wouldn't even let my friends invest because I didn't want to lose their money. I thought it was like, it's rapid. You know, I'd rather lose my own money. So changing between flights, apart from scheduled maintenance, is and then a portion of the. We almost did die at SpaceX actually. So I budgeted for 3 flights. I mean, technically, I did have a plan where I had the money from PayPal. I had like about 180 million from PayPal. And I thought, I'll allocate half of that to SpaceX and Tesla and Solar City, and that should be fine. I'll have 90 million. Like, just lots, We almost did. But then what happened is things cost more and took longer than I thought. So I had a choice of either put the rest of the money in, or the companies are going to die. And so I ended up putting all the money in and borrowing money for rent from friends. That should be fine. 2008 was brutal. 2008 we had the third consecutive failure of the Falcon rocket from SpaceX.
เล็กหรือ
Tesla
รอการก็
almost went
กำลัง
bankrupt.
ต่าง
We
แชทก่อน
closed
นะ
our
ครับ
financing round 6 p.m.
มาที่
Christmas
แอด
Eve
แล้วก็
2008.
เรา
It
ซื้อ
was
ซ
the
อส
last hour of the last
นะครับ
day that it
ไม่
was
มี
possible.
เรื่องของ
We
ก็
went
เรื่อง
bankrupt 2 days after
ทีนี้อัน
Christmas.
ต่อไปก็จะเป็นซับ
And
อเลิร์แล้วกัน
of course, that was like rough.
ชอบ
Man.
ให้ไฟล์มาอย่างนี้แหละ
Wait,
เนี่ยฮะ
it
โอเค
poses a
เรียบร้อย
question, or maybe you just
ทีนี้
answer
อัน
the question
ต่อ
of
ไป
why
ก็
is
จะ
no one
เป็น
else doing this?
ซับอเลิร์แล้วกันก็คือมันจะขึ้นเตือนว่าใครซับสไครต์เราระหว่างไลฟ์สตรีมนะครับ
What's your pain
เตือน
threshold?
ว่ามีเพราะว่ามันดีฟอล
Well,
ต์
it's real high.
ที่เราก็เอาของมาที่นี่ก็ทีนี้เราก็ผมเทส
Yeah, I
กับ
mean, SpaceX is alive, but
โอเค
skin of its teeth,
เป็น
so
เท่าไห
is
ร่
Tesla.
โอเคขั้นแรกฮะ Google เลย
If things had just gone a little bit the other
YouTube
way,
Resort
both companies would be dead.
ยูใช่ไหมครับ
And
แล้วก็ก๊อป
like
เฉ
one of the
พาะ
most difficult
จะ
choices I
พิมพ์ไปเลย
ever
เลือก
faced
ตรงนี้ก็ได้ฟอนต์
in
ผม
life
สัตว์ครับ อันนี้ผม
was in 2008.
โกตามปกตินี่แหละเศษที่ขึ้นข้างบนนะ
I think I had
นี่เลยนี่ไงเรียบร้อยดัตเตอร์ซอสเหมือนเดิมคือนี่ในส่วนต่อไปก็คือส่วน
$30 left in
Donate นะครับ
2008. I had 2 choices.
โดนเด็กศูนย์จุด
Put it all into one company,
หรือว่าจำนวนเงินล่าอีกหนึ่งเนาะโหลดเสร็จได้นะ ผม
or
เลือกอะไร
split
โดยมัน
between the 2
ขึ้น
companies.
เกม
But if I split it between the 2 companies, then both might die. And when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating something, or building something, it's like a child. And so it's like, which one am I going to let one starve to death? I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I split the money between the 2. Fortunately, thank goodness, they both came through.
We've got a question from the audience that builds on that. What was your biggest failure and how did it change you? What was your biggest failure and how did it change you?
I have to really think hard about that. Failure.
เกมเอร์นี่ก็ของเกม
There's your answer.
มันก็รีวิวตีคุณ
Well, there's a ton of failures along the way, that's
ที่
for
มันแล้ว
sure.
ลองใช้ค่าที่เลยต้องกดรีวิวด้วยนะรีวิวคือปุ่มนี้
Like so
Video-
as I said, for SpaceX, first 3 launches failed,
หน้าตาแล้วกัน
and
คลิกขวาไปเลยนี่มาของรูปไฟ
just
ที
barely
นี้
able
อัน
to
ต่อ
scrape
อย่างนี้แหละ
together enough parts and money
Image.
to do the fourth launch. If that fourth launch had failed, we would have been dead. So multiple failures along the way. I tried very hard to get the right expertise in for SpaceX. I tried hard to find a great chief engineer for the rocket, but the good chief engineers wouldn't join, and the bad ones, well, there was no point in hiring them. So I ended up being chief engineer of the rocket. So if I could have found somebody better, then we would have maybe had less than 3 failures.
How do you plan a business where you know the rocket business? You know some of these things are going to blow up on the launch pad. How does the business plan work?
I don't really have a business plan. Yeah, I haven't had a business. I had a business plan way back in the Zip 2 days. But these things are just always wrong. So I just didn't bother with business plans after that. Yeah. I mean, I think, wishful thinking for sure is a source of many problems in many walks of life. Business or personal, wishful thinking causes a lot of trouble. You really have to ask, whether something is true or not. Does it make sense? And if it ever feels like too easy, it probably is. But for all the drama of SpaceX, I think Tesla's actually been probably 2/3 of my total drama dose of a time. Tesla's a drama magnet. It's crazy.
A lot of people want to know, you're managing 3 or 4 companies now, each of them trying to do something revolutionary, each of them challenging a business that has historically been regarded as impossible to challenge or disrupt. How do you prioritize? How do you prioritize between the different companies? How do you prioritize? How do you spend your time?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, could I trouble you for a water? I've got a bit of a cold, so my voice is a bit hoarse. It's okay. In terms of time priority, for business time, almost all of it is really dedicated to SpaceX and Tesla. It may sound like I've got a lot of different endeavors. But it's overwhelmingly SpaceX and Tesla in terms of time allocation. So it's and then for non-business stuff, it's almost entirely kid stuff. My kids are here today. Actually, brought them along to South by Southwest. Hope they're having a good time. They went and saw the Westworld exhibit, or it's really amazing. If any of you haven't seen the Westworld, what do you call it, exhibit or a?
I don't know what you call it. I think you just call it Westworld at this point.
Theme park. It's really incredibly well done. I took the kids there yesterday. They had a great time. But yeah, I think probably one of the biggest misunderstandings is that I'm actually not an investor. Sometimes people think I'm an investor or I invest in things. I don't invest in anything. In fact, the only public security that I own of any kind is Tesla. And then the next biggest is SpaceX. And then the Boring Company kind of started it more as a joke, because that would be a funny name for a company. We put the 0 in bring. I mean, it's sort of like, that doesn't make any sense.
But when we talk, I remember when you first told me that you were thinking about tunnels.
Yeah, when did I first tell you about that?
Years ago.
Okay, it's like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like,
I thought you were joking.
It was. I was joking, but it's not because of some epiphany that I had one day driving down the 405. That's how it gets translated somehow. I was talking about tunnels for years and years. For probably 5 years or 4 years at least, whenever I'd give a talk and people would ask me about what opportunities do you see in the world, I'd say tunnels. Can someone please build tunnels? So after 4 or 5 years of begging people to build tunnels, and still no tunnels, I was like, okay, I want to build a tunnel. So like maybe I'm missing something here. So I was like basically talking people's ears off for tunnels for several years, and then said, well, let's find out what it takes to build a tunnel. And so I started digging a tunnel. I wanted to my office at SpaceX. So I said, well, let's just carve off a part of the parking lot across the road so I can see if anything's happening or not. And then we named our first boring machine Godot, because I kept waiting for it. It never came. Finally it did. And we got it going. And now we're making good progress. And we're funding the company for merchandise sales. So thank you for anyone who's bought our flamethrower. You will not be sorry, or maybe you will. It won't be boring.
We have a video, I think, here of the latest vision for the Boring Company in terms of how it planned, the hopes
Cool.
that
I didn't even know this. Great.
อย่างนี้เลยแล้วก็เลือกไฟล์แล้วก็มันต่อไปแหละ
We've added some.
ซับอะไรทำยังไงกดเข้าไปเลยคาดว่าใคร Subscribe เราระหว่างไลฟ์สตรีมนะครับทำยังไงต้องคนโดนคัดมาต่างๆเช่นเดียวกันไปที่แบบแล้วมันก็จะขึ้นอย่างนี้เลยนี่ไงเรียบร้อยแล้วก็ก๊อปแล้วก็มาที่ชื่อไฟล์มาแล้วเทคขึ้นไหมเป็นร้อยทีนี้มันจะให้จะทำ Subscribe ทันใช่ไหมโอ้โหเขียนอย่างนี้เลย YouTube ด้วย
I think, when we were first talking about the concept, tunnels feel like a resolutely old school solution to a problem.
That I invented YouTube Resort YouTube Game Sub Counter
And I always tell holding out hope for the flying
Channel
car, and then you ask me
เป็น
one
ID
simple
ใช่ไหม
question.
ให้เราใส่ ID
The
Channel
question for me about
ง่าย
flying
ๆครับ
cars
ก็คือไปที่
forever,
Channel
which
ข
was,
องเรา
would you want your
แล้วก็
neighbor
ก๊อป
to
เฉ
have
พาะ
a flying car?
Yes, exactly.
และอันสุด
This
ท้าย
is exactly the question. Oh,
อันนี้
you want a
เรียก
flying car? How about everyone around
3D
you has a flying
ซึ่ง
car
เรามาเลือกต
too?
รงนี้ก็ได้นี่ฟอนต์แล้วก็พิมพ์ชื่อ
That
ชื่อไปเลย
doesn't sound so good.
เงินแล้วเลยเป็นเมสเซจ
And I
เอา
think
มา
one
ด้วย
of the
นะ
interesting things about tunneling is it's
นี่ไง
one of
เรียบ
these
ร้อย
things that there's not a lot of market competition there. It's not it's something that's ripe for change. So how do you? I remember you talked about the philosophy with Godot was to just keep running it basically until you figured out why it can't run any faster.
Yeah. So. The Boring Company, to be clear, it's like literally 2% of my time. It's probably 20% of my tweets. But tweets do not correlate to actual time spent. I sort of just have fun with the Boring Company, but my time allocation is literally about 2%.
Talk about your time allocation. I think one of the things you spend an awful lot of time thinking about, I know, is artificial intelligence. It's something that you and I have as a shared interest, and it's something that our audience is interested in as well. The question here is a lot of experts in AI don't share the same level of concern that you do about the dangers of AI.
Fools.
What
Famous last words.
What specifically do you believe that they don't?
Well, the biggest issue I see with so-called AI experts is that they think they know more than they do. And they think they're smarter than they actually are. In general, we are all much smarter than we think we are, but much less smart. We're dumber than we think we are, by a lot. So this tends to plague smart people. They just can't. They define themselves by their intelligence, and they don't like the idea that a machine could be way smarter than them. So they discount the idea, which is fundamentally flawed. That's the wishful thinking situation. I'm really quite close to. I'm very close to the cutting edge in AI, and it scares the hell out of me. It's capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows, and the rate of improvement is exponential. You can see this in things like AlphaGo, which went from, in the span of maybe 6 to 9 months, it went from being unable to beat even a reasonably good Go player to then beating the European world champion, who was ranked 600, then beating Lisa Doll 4-5, who had been world champion for many years, then beating the current world champion, then beating everyone while playing simultaneously. Then there was AlphaZero, which crushed AlphaGo 100-0. And AlphaZero just learned by playing itself, and it can play basically any game that you put the rules in for. Whatever rules you give it, it literally read the rules, play the game, and be superhuman. For any game. Nobody expected that rate of improvement. If you ask those same experts who think AI is not progressing at the rate that I'm saying, I think you will find that their predictions for things like Go and other AI advancements have their batting average is quite weak. It's not good. We'll see this also with self-driving. I think probably by end of next year, self-driving will encompass essentially all modes of driving and be at least 100 to 200% safer than a person by the end of next year. We're talking like maybe 18 months from now. NHTSA did a study on Tesla's Autopilot version 1, which is relatively primitive, and found that it was a 45% reduction in highway accidents. And that's despite Autopilot 1 being just version 1. Version 2, I think, will be at least 2 or 3 times better. That's the current version that's running right now. So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. We have to figure out some way to ensure that the advent of digital superintelligence is one which is symbiotic with humanity. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face, and the most pressing one.
And how do we do that? I mean, if we take it that it's inevitable at this point, that some version of AI is coming down the line, how do we steer through that?
Well, I'm not normally an advocate of regulation and oversight. I mean, I think one should generally err on the side of minimizing those things. But this is a case where you have a very serious danger to the public. And so therefore, there needs to be a public body that has insight and then oversight to confirm that everyone is developing AI safely. This is extremely important. I think the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far. So why do we have no regulatory oversight? This is insane.
Well, it's a question you've been asking for a long time, and I think it's a question that's come to the forefront over the last year, where you begin to realize that it doesn't necessarily, I think if we've all been focused in on the idea of artificial superintelligence, right? Which is clearly a danger, but maybe a little further out. What's happened over the last year is you've seen what I've been calling artificial stupidity. You're talking about, algorithmic manipulation of social media. Like we're in it now. It's starting to happen. How do we? What's the intervention at this point?
I'm not really all that worried about the short-term stuff. Things that are, like narrow AI is not a species-level risk. It will result in dislocation, in lost jobs and sort of better weaponry and that kind of thing. But it is not a fundamental species level risk, whereas digital. So it's really all about laying the groundwork to make sure that if humanity collectively decides that creating digital superintelligence is the right move, then we should do so very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. This is the most important thing that we could possibly do.
Yeah. Building on that, other than AI and the other issues that you're tackling, transportation, energy production, aerospace, what issues should our next generation of leaders be focused on solving? What else is coming down the line?
Well, I mean, there are other things that are on a longer time scale. And obviously the things that I believe in, like extending life beyond Earth, making life multiplanetary. I'm a big believer in sort of Asimov's foundation series, or the principle that you really want to, I recommend reading the foundation series, but it's like if you know that there's likely to be, well, you don't know, but there's likely to be another Dark Ages, which it seems, my guess is there probably will be. It's shortened the length of the Dark Ages. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base. Ideally on Mars, because Mars is far enough away from Earth that a war on Earth, the Mars base might survive. It's more likely to survive than a moon base. But I think a moon base and a Mars base that could perhaps help regenerate life back here on Earth would be really important, and to get that done before a possible World War III. Last century we had 2 massive world wars, 3 if you count the Cold War. I think it's unlikely that we will never have another world war again. Most likely to support humanity into the future. But I think sustainable energy is also obviously really important. It's tautological. If it's not sustainable, it's unsustainable.
Yeah, how close are we to solving that problem?
Well, I think that the core technologies are there with wind, solar, with batteries. The fundamental problem is that there's an unpriced externality in the cost of CO2. The market economics works very well if things are priced correctly, but when things are not priced correctly, and something that has a real cost has zero cost, then that's where you get distortions in the market that inhibit the progress of other technologies. So essentially anything that produces carbon, it puts carbon into the atmosphere, which includes rockets, by the way. So I'm not excluding rockets from this. There has to be a price, and that you can start off with a low price, but then that price, and then depending upon whether that price has any effect on the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, you can adjust that price up or down. But in the absence of a price, we sort of pretend that digging trillions of tons of fossil fuels from deep under the earth and putting it into the atmosphere, we're pretending that has no probability of a bad outcome. And the entire scientific community is saying, obviously, it's going to have a bad outcome. Obviously, you're changing the chemical constituency of the atmosphere. So it's really up to people and governments to put a price on carbon, and then automatically the right thing happens. It's really straightforward.
What do we do with the carbon that's already up there?
I actually think we can manage with the current carbon level, or even a little bit higher. It's and this is going to sound like I'm backtracking, but there's actually an argument that more carbon in the atmosphere is actually good, but up to a point. So we might actually arguably have been a little carbon starved. If you go back 200 years ago and say, okay, well, 400 years ago, we had like 280, 290 parts per million of carbon. We're probably a little carbon starved. Now we're about 400, just past 400 mark. I think somewhere in the 400s, probably okay. We don't have to worry about sequestering carbon or anything like that. But now, if this momentum keeps going, and we start going up to 600, 800, 1,000, 1,500, that's where things get really squirrely. The sheer momentum of the world's energy infrastructure is leading us in that direction. So it's just very important that the public and the governments push to ensure that the correct price of carbon is paid. So that will be the thing that matters. Yeah.
Our audience is very interested in knowing how many hours of sleep you got last night.
I don't know, about 6, 5 or 6, I think. 5? I don't know.
I feel like we know part of the answer to this because you were trapped in Westworld for a while. But how? I mean, on a regular day for you, are you sleeping? You're not sleeping a lot, right?
Oh, geez, do I look that bad?
No. You look great.
Oh,
but
thanks.
we just imagine with the amount of responsibilities, with the amount of with what you've got going on, do these problems still keep you up at night, or do you think we're on our way to solving them?
Well, right now the only things that are really stressing me out in a big way are AI, obviously. That's like always there, and I'm working really hard on Tesla Model 3 production, we're making good progress, but it's hugely hard work. But those are the two most stressful things in my life right now. Yeah.
Our audience really wants to know, what do you hope the world will look like for children born today when they're your age?
When, sorry?
What do you hope for the world to look like? What's the best case scenario? Say we solve these problems. What's that world look like?
Let's see. So, I think a good picture would look like, we really substantially transferred to sustainable generation and consumption of electricity, so that the CO2 risk and the ocean rising risk is mitigated, and we're not looking at having Florida and sort of large portions of the world underwater. That'd be great. to not to have addressed that risk. That'd be enormous. For us to have a base on the moon, base on Mars, be out there exploring the solar system, start building industry on essentially having human civilization go out there, and have it be such that anyone can go to the moon or Mars or out to the solar system if they want, making it really affordable. I do think it's important that there's competition, that there are multiple companies doing this, not just SpaceX. And that AI risk is that I guess there's sort of a benign AI, and that we're able to achieve a symbiosis with that AI. Ideally, the AI. There's somebody who I can't remember his name, but had a good suggestion for what the optimization of the AI should be. What's its utility function? You have to be careful about this, because if you say maximize happiness, and the AI concludes that happiness is a function of dopamine and serotonin, so it captures all humans and jacks your brain with large amounts of dopamine and serotonin. Like, okay, it's not what we meant.
It sounds pretty good, though.
Oh, you'll love it. Well, I like the definition of the AI should try to maximize the freedom of action of humanity. Maximize the freedom of action. Maximize freedom, essentially. I like that definition. But we do want a close coupling between collective human intelligence and digital intelligence. And Neuralink is trying to help in that regard by creating an interface between, a high bandwidth interface between AI and human brain. We're already a cyborg in the sense that your phone and your computer are kind of an extension of you.
Just low bandwidth input output.
Exactly, it's just low bandwidth, particularly output. I mean, 2 thumbs basically.
So how do we solve that problem?
The bandwidth thing?
The bandwidth issue. I mean, we've all succumbed to it now. We're all cyborgs. We're just low efficiency cyborgs. So how do we make it better?
I think we've got to build an interface. Like we didn't evolve to have a communications jack, or some. So there's got to be essentially vast numbers of tiny electrodes that are able to read write from your brain. Of course, security is pretty important in this situation, to say the least.
I was going to say, I'm not coming with. I'm keeping my brain air gapped.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people will choose to do that. But it's a bit like Ian Banks' neural lace, but in the case of neural lace, it's sort of that's there from when you're born, or it's more of a
backup.
Sorry?
It's a backup.
Yeah, kind of a backup. This would be there's a digital extension of you that is an AI, the AI extension of you, a tertiary layer of intelligence. So you've got your limbic system, your cortex, and high bandwidth connection is what.
ฮัลโหลสวัสดีเพื่อนๆชาวเกมเมอร์นะฮะแล้วก็เพื่อนๆชาวแคสเตอร์ทุกท่านนะครับผมวันนี้เราก็อยู่กับเบสฟันชาแนลนะฮะวันนี้ก็จะมาไม่มีอะไรมากฮะก็หลายคนรีเควสต์มานะว่าอยากให้สอนวิธีการไลฟ์สตรีมหน่อยได้นะฮะจะสอนวิธีการไลฟ์สตรีมแบบละเอียดยิกๆเลยนะฮะยิบนะฮะก็โหลดเสร็จแล้วโอเคเนี่ยเราอาจจะเป็นพวกนี้ก็ได้ก็จะเอาซีแปะใหม่ภาพมาเราก็แนบดูสภาพก็ได้โอเคบิดเขาเลือกคือ10,500 1.5 ให้ชัดเท่าไหร่คุณเนี่ยstability นะฮะคีย์อะไร
We don't talk that much about Starlink, but essentially it's intended to provide low latency, high bandwidth internet connectivity.
สูงเยอะมาก
There actually will not be enough
ค่าปกติของเขาอยู่โลกผมไม่รู้เป็นไง
onboard the satellite system to
โอเคเสียงอันนี้เป็นตั้งค่าปกติของเขาอยู่แล้วนะฮะจะปิดหรือเปิดการใช้แอโร่ก็ได้ครับ
Digital AI
ถ้าเปิดการใช้แอโร่ผมไม่รู้เป็นไง
super intelligence requires a lot of big servers on the ground.
เสียงอันนี้เป็นตั้งค่าปกติของเขาอยู่แล้วนะฮะ
To provide people with who don't have any internet connectivity with internet connectivity.
อะไรมาจากที่
And it's very good for spas.
เราปิดไม่ได้ครับเราไม่สามารถปิด
Sparsely
ได้โอเค
populated and moderately sparsely populated areas.
จริงๆแล้ว
And for giving people in cities
เวลา
a choice of low cost
แล้วมันจะ
of
วิธี
internet
นี้ครับผม
access.
ไปดูเน็ตเราก็จะโดนดึงเยอะมากเท่านั้นด้วยเนี่ยเราก็จะมีบัฟเฟอร์รัวๆเลยฮะจะปิดหรือเปิดการใช้แอโร่ก็ได้ครับค่าปกติของเขาอยู่แล้วคือกดถ่ายคลิปไงค่านะฮะกลางแล้วก็ทำการ copy ฮะตั้งค่าตรงนี้นะแต่ก็โอเคครับเกมเสร็จปุ๊บ
Very cool. I have to ask it because it's the number one question. Just going back to Mars, what kind of government do you envision for the first Martian colony? What's your title?
Yeah, exactly. You have really access to mailboxes, or there wasn't even really the post office was very primitive. A lot of people couldn't write.
And what's your title?
So you had to have some form of representative democracy, or things just short. Long laws, it's like that's something suspicious is going on if there's long law. If the size of the law exceeds the word count of Lord of the Rings, which it does, amazingly, then it's like something's wrong. So there should be a limit to the size of the law that you should be able to digest it. Like, how come you can read the Constitution and all of the amendments, like you can read those in maybe an hour?
ปุ๊บเนี่ย
Like you can
คือ
read those in
เวลาท่าน
maybe an hour.
นั้นอีกวิธี
And we
Okay,
covered so
เราปิด
much
ไม่
of
ได้
our civilization
มี
by
สอง
that,
จอ
and
จอ
yet
นะ
modern law
ไปดู
is
ภาพ
this obtuse
เริ่ม โคมนะฮะ
super
ที่
boring
ผู้ชมเห็นนั่นเอง
tome
โอเคฮะ
that's
นั่นแหละ
indecipherable to almost anyone.
นะ
So
แม่งมากันไวได้
direct democracy
ไม่ได้ไม่ใช่
laws
เดี๋ยว
laws
อัน
that
นี้
are
รู้เห็น
comprehensible.
ว่าข้อมูลนี้มีประโยชน์อย่างไรนะฮะ
I think
กด
having
แชร์
some
ผม
kind of
ไลค์
history
subscribe
on
นะฮะเพื่อเป็นกำลังใจเล็กๆน้อยๆผมนะฮะหวังว่าวันนี้นะฮะหลายๆคนอาจจะได้เทคนิคนะฮะ
because things just
หรือ
get
อะไร
too
ดีๆกลับไป
inertia.
บ้านนะ
Affects
ผม
me,
ไม่
that's
มาก
gonna
ก็น้อย
become
วันนี้
inertia.
เดฟแฟนชั่นแนล
So
ต้องลา
probably
ไปก่อนนะฮะ
I don't know what
พบกันใหม่โอกาสหน้า
maybe it's like 60.
สวัสดี
Maybe it requires
จะมี
60% to get a law in place, but any number above 40% can remove a law. Otherwise, you just get laws just accumulate over time, and it's sort of you can't move. You get hardening of the arteries of civilization with rules and rules and rules and rules. So it should be just easier to get rid of a rule than to put one in. Maybe they should even have like some kind of sunset clause, so that they just automatically expire unless there's enough of an impetus to keep them around. Otherwise, you just get laws just accumulate.
I know there's a fair amount of interest. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the very early days with
You get hardening of the arteries.
Tesla and how it came together. Your brother Kimball is here. Thought we'd bring him out.
So it should be
You guys could talk a little bit about it.
rule than to put one in. There.
You guys might get lucky tonight.
I notice you have a guitar. I'm going to ignore that.
We got hats. We got a guitar.
But I would guess there are a fair number of entrepreneurs here today, and a fair number of people interested looking at Tesla, which now extraordinary success of it.
There.
You know, how did this come together? When you guys were looking at, I know famously, you were
You guys
looking
might get lucky tonight.
at problems you could solve. I notice you have a guitar. What do those conversations look like?
Yeah. So the.
I would guess there are a fair
Let's
number
see.
of
So,
entrepreneurs
I'm talking to Kimball, thanks for coming on, about the things that I thought would be most important to work on for a long time, all the way back to college days. Electric cars are something I've been interested in since I was like, 18, 19. When do you first recall hearing me talk about electric cars? Just curious. Yeah, so
First time was, well, you talked about it in the 90s a lot. We used to brainstorm a lot randomly, even in, I think we were 20 years old. And the first thing I remember us brainstorming was solving connectivity amongst doctors. And we were on a road trip from
that was
Silicon-
hopeless.
a long time ago. We had a lot of doctors in the family, so we had the information. But the idea was really to solve that problem where we from Silicon Valley to Philadelphia, brainstorming how you do it. This is before the internet, so we in our minds designing network computers, doctors talking. This has all happened, of course, over 25 years, but that's sort of the first time I remember us really trying to solve a world problem, and unless it was a world problem that was really important, it just wasn't that interesting to us. Electric cars, you talked about for a long time, but I remember walking into your house once, this is in probably 2002 or 2003, and you had these plans laid out that the team at Tesla had, or the earlier guys had basically said, we're going to take this Lotus Elise, we're going to convert it into an electric car. And we sat down and talked about it for a bit, and it wasn't so much that it could be done. I think we all believed it could be done. It was more just the attitude that it should be done. And then we went from there.
Yeah, well, the first internships that I had that were interesting were on ultracapacitors for use in electric cars. So that's why I first came out to Silicon Valley in like 93 or 92 or something like that, was to work at a company called Pinnacle Research on advanced ultracapacitors with the idea that this could be a solution to the energy storage problem in electric vehicles. And then when I graduated from Penn, I was going to be doing a PhD at Stanford in material science and physics, trying to figure out if there's a way to solve for an ultra high density solid state capacitor that would have enough range to power an electric vehicle. So in fact, that's in '95, and then I wasn't sure. This is one of those things where you could work on it for a long time and discover that there's actually no good solution. You could publish a paper, and you get a PhD and all that, but it would be academic in its value. So in '95, I had a choice of either work on this energy storage system for electric vehicles or try to play a role in building the internet. But the internet stuff was happening right then and there. Whereas the electric vehicle technology was going to progress slowly on its own, whether I was there or not. So I thought, well, I'll put the grad studies on hold and do something to help build the internet, or do something useful on the internet. And that's when I talked to Kimball, and you were working in Canada at the time. And said, hey, why don't we try to do this company in Silicon Valley?
It's pretty cool. We built we were the first to see maps in door-to-door direction. It had been built by a company, Navtech, but never been on the internet. And it was so cool to be the first two humans to see it. You can draw a map, type in an address, get directions. Things you probably all did about 50 times today each. And we were the first to see that and put it on the internet, so it was really cool.
It was the first maps and directions, yellow pages and white pages on the internet.
We were the first to
So,
see maps and door-to-door direction.
and then we ended up helping bring a lot of publications online. So as investors and customers, the New York Times Company, Knight Ridder, Hearst, and a number of others. Yeah, but I always wanted to get back to electric vehicles because that was a primary interest of mine from undergrad and grad days. And so after Zip2, still did one more internet company because I thought Zip2 had not achieved its full potential. We built this incredible technology, but it wasn't being used by the customers in the right way. It was a bit like building F-22 fighter jets, and then you sell them to people, and they roll them down the hill at each other. And you're like, that's really not the way to use it. Okay. One more internet company. In fact, that's where I decided you really want to go to the end consumer. If you've got great technology, you want to go all the way to the end consumer. Don't sell it to some bonehead legacy company that doesn't understand how to use it. So F-22 fighter jets. So with X.com, which became PayPal, that's where we tried to do something significant with the internet, and it got sort of part of the way towards its objective. After PayPal went public and then it got bought by eBay in 2002, that actually freed up me and a bunch of other people to go and create companies. And I started debating between either solar, electric car, or space. I thought space was like the least likely to have somebody, the least likely to attract entrepreneurial talent. I thought like nobody is going to be crazy enough to do space, so I better do space. So I started off with space first, and then about a year and a half later, in 2003, I had lunch with J.B. Straubel and Harold Rosen, and it was at this like fish restaurant in El Segundo. And Harold Rosen had been involved in space and electric vehicles, and JB had just graduated from college and was working with him, and the conversation turned to electric vehicles because Harold had done something called Rosen Motors, which was like an attempted EV startup. And I said, well, I've always been super interested in electric vehicles. I was going to do my PhD on advanced energy storage. I was going to do grad studies on advanced energy storage techniques for electric vehicles. And so JB said, well, have you heard of this company called AC Propulsion? Because they had created the T0 electric sports car as a prototype. I was like, wow, that's great. Like lithium-ion batteries had really achieved a level of energy density that for the first time could allow you to have a significant range in an electric car. And they had a sports car that had 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, a 250-mile range, and it was pretty cool. Now it was just made of it was just a kit car, so it didn't have a roof or airbags or thermal control system, and it was extremely unreliable. It wasn't productized, but it was a proof of concept. So I got the test drive from AC Propulsion, and I was like, wow, you guys should really commercialize this. This would show people what electric cars can do. And I tried for months to get AC Propulsion to go into production with the T0. And like, they just were not interested in doing that. Amazingly, they wanted to do an electric Scion. You know, like that boxy car? But the problem is, like, the electric Scion would cost $70,000. Or you could build a sports car for $100,000. But these things are just always wrong. Like, nobody's going to buy the electric Scion. And it's